IU fans, it's the middle of the summer. Things are moving. 4th of July is around the corner. And it finally seems like the offseason's taking a little bit of a breather. We had the end of the NCAA tournament. Then we had the transfer portal run, which that was 2 months in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then last week, we got the outstanding news that Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trayce Jackson-Davis heard their names announced in the 2023 NBA draft. We're going to cover what it means for the Indiana men's basketball program that they saw 2 of their guys picked. How can the program benefit from that going forward? And then we'll take a look at Indiana's non-conference schedule and see what we make of it and cover a whole bunch more here on episode 301 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Friday, June 30th, 2023, where I'm your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, we talked during the draft. There's been so much aftermath after that Thursday night in Brooklyn. Indiana, for the first time in years, heard one of their own selected in the freaking draft. What were your takeaways as Jalen Hood-Schifino went 17 to the Lakers, Trayce Jackson-Davis went 57 to the Warriors? It was a great night for IU basketball.
It was a great night for 2 of IU basketball's finest, especially in recent years. I think the last guy that was drafted was Romeo. That's just wild. Yeah. It's been since 2016.
Yeah.
2017. Yeah. Since Romeo got drafted. It's just insane.
I don't think it's that long ago. I'll get the exact date. I don't think it was 17. I think it was after that.
No, I was after that. It might have been 2018, 2019.
I'll get it. Just keep going.
It's something like that. Something like that. Anyway,
it's been a while.
It's been multiple years, which at Indiana should just never be the case, to be honest. But anyways, positives are, I think they both ended up in the best position possible for them.
I agree.
I think Jalen ends up on a team that is known to develop guards, and known an org that's known to give young players a chance. You know, if you look at Austin Reeves, right? Jalen's going to get a shot on that team to be great. And then the same thing goes for Trayce. He's on a team that loves to play small and needs a small ball 5 and needs a guy that can pass the ball at the 5. And Trayce does all of that. And he happens to be playing with one of the best players to ever play basketball, both of them. Right. I mean, you know, Jalen's playing with my GOAT, and Curry is not that far off. Right. So both of our guys end up being drafted onto teams where they're not going to have to do much their first year other than just sit there, watch, and kind of do whatever they're asked to do. I feel like Trayce is probably going to end up being asked to do a little bit more than Jalen will in year 1, which is crazy because, you know, Trayce is the 56th pick in the draft.
57th.
57th pick in the draft. There's 56 picks ahead of Trayce, right? But I still feel like he's going to offer way more from game 1 than Jalen is. But Jalen's going to be probably sprinkled in as the season goes on as a guy that Lakers fans are going to love. Like, I'm going to see Laker Film Room on Twitter go off about how impressed he is with Jalen Hood-Schifino, and then point out like his playmaking and his off the ball movement, and you know, how he plays as secondary playmaker in an offense. I mean, a lot of the NBA guys are like, I don't like him as a primary ball handler and primary playmaker. And if you've ever watched Jalen Hood-Schifino play a game of basketball, that's not who he is. He's a combo guard. He does both. And so I'm excited to see him in a position to play his natural role, and come off the bench and be that guy that can, you know, give a little bit of energy and give a little bit of, you know, as crazy as it's going to sound, stability at the ball handler position for the Lakers, because they don't really have anybody that can handle the ball that reliably outside of LeBron James. Like, I think D'Angelo Russell's too erratic with it at times. You go and you look at Schroeder, does Dennis Schroeder things. Austin Reeves turned into their best secondary ball handler. And I love Austin Reeves, don't get me wrong, he's a great player. But I think Jalen right now is a better pick and roll playmaker with the ball in his hands than Reeves.
Yeah, I agree.
And some people are going to think that's blasphemy, but that's just how impressed I am with Jalen when he has the ball in his hands. It's just, again, his analytics don't look good. So the NBA draft nerds are like, he sucks. He should have gone in the second round. And it's like, no, like, let's chill, guys. Let's chill.
Yeah, please, let's chill. It was so nice to hear both of their names picked. I love the comment you made about, the opportunity now for Hood-Schifino and Jackson Davis to play alongside truly some of the greatest in NBA history, a couple of the greatest players in NBA history.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, Jalen Hood-Schifino might lean more on Anthony Davis than LeBron James himself, just as far as the pick and roll, the pick and pop type action. And, I would not be surprised if we look at the end of the season and Hood-Schifino and Anthony Davis are one of the best two-man combinations the Lakers have all season. It's going to be, the short term is exciting, but the long term too. You very much see potential for Hood-Schifino to grow into a starting role. You can definitely see him grow into an opportunity to put up big numbers for the Lakers eventually in his career. And what a better spot to do it for Jalen. I was just thinking about this after the draft. Like, if he could choose the team he could go to going into the draft, he might have said, well, the Spurs would be nice because that would mean I'm the first overall pick. But the Lakers are his childhood team. I mean, he's bled purple and gold in his life as far as following the Lakers. He committed to Indiana on Kobe Day, August 24th, a couple of years ago. And you can see that, ear to ear grin that he's got on all of his Instagram posts and his press conference clippings and, all sorts of things. It's so awesome to see a player actually get selected by a team that he rooted for his whole life. Mm-hmm. Jackson Davis, many people pointed out, yes, I'm not sure, how much Jackson Davis is a Pacers fan. Of course, Jackson was born in California, and now he's going back to the Golden State, literally, to play for the Warriors. And now TJD is going to have a great chance to really flourish in that bench role. Mike Woodson commented coming out of the draft that truly the sky is the limit for both of them. Woodson made a surprise guest appearance on a radio show in the Bay Area and said that Trayce Jackson Davis's game, if you think basketball is all about the jump shot, I believe the quote was, "You're a fool." Which that's not only true, but it also goes to show that if Jackson Davis can develop that part of his game, he can really step up and really become a fantastic contributor for that Warriors team. Romeo Langford was selected in 2019. That was the last Hoosier to get picked in the draft before this season. The 2017 draft was the last one that had two Indiana players picked, OG Anunoby and Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant was picked by the Lakers. Hood-Schifino was the first IU draft pick to LA since Thomas Bryant was taken. So Jalen Hood-Schifino called it surreal. Trayce Jackson Davis so excited to go out and play now for a team that is one of the top 4 or 5 favorites in the Western Conference going into this upcoming season. But from an Indiana standpoint, Matt, this is a big moment. Like, I don't think you can put enough emphasis on how important it is that not only the result was great, that is, Indiana got 2 players picked in the draft. There are only a small subset of universities that had that happen to them, in addition to the great Metropolitans 92 out of France. The thing is, the result is great. You had Hood-Schifino and Jackson Davis picked. The process was so starkly different for both of them. Yet it goes to show what this coaching staff is capable of accomplishing. Mm-hmm. This is a big deal, right? Not only to have 2 players drafted, but to see the development process and be able to pitch that story now to recruits now and in the future. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. I think you're spot on with that analysis. I mean, you go in 2 very different situations. I think you could talk about the staff kind of rekindling Trayce Jackson Davis's draft stock, right? Because to be honest, after his sophomore year, when Archie left, it was in the tank. He was going to be an undrafted player as a sophomore, and that was going to be it. That was going to be hands
Europe, probably,
Europe.
right?
No,
Yeah.
he would have been
No,
G League for
he would have
sure.
stuck
Because
in it.
his
Okay,
dad's
all right.
because of his dad.
True.
He would have found it on himself on a roster somehow. But it's still, he would have been the
Bench
nepotism
warmer.
card, right?
Yeah.
It would have been the nepotism card.
Yeah.
He would have gotten on a roster because of his dad, and then it probably would have worked out because that's who Trayce is, and he would have figured it out. But it wouldn't have been accredited to Mike Woodson or the staff or anybody at IU. And he just would have been another 5-star that came to IU and kind of just fizzled, right? And in the end, he ended up falling in the draft, and people were confused at how he made it to the 56th pick. When like that, you like look at all these other fan bases, they're like mad at their second round picks because they should have picked Trayce Jackson Davis. That was not the case.
No.
Not even 12 months ago. Like he wouldn't have been a second round pick last year either. And this is a better draft, I think, than last year's. So, and that's just a credit to what the staff did with him this year and turning him into the second best player in college basketball. And then Jalen, you took a 5-star recruit who, some people said they weren't sure it was going to be a one and done and not game ready, and turn him into a guy that went top 20 in the draft and comfortably too. Some Lakers fans you'll see are not happy with the pick because they wanted somebody else. I don't understand it. I think he's in the perfect position, and he's a guy that, again, is going to contribute from day one on a team. And Woodson and what the staff did with him last year and giving him experience, whether it was their choice or not, at the point guard position really paid off dividends for his draft stock. And so you can go and you can look back now on the decisions the staff made during the season, whether it was running, action for Trayce all the time, or it was putting the ball in Jalen Hood-Schifino's hand. I mean, it was all for these guys to get drafted at the end of the day. Of course, they kind of help you win basketball games too, because you're pretty good at basketball. But the staff can point out how they put these guys in positions to succeed. And that's the most important thing when you're talking to recruits, because again, like you've seen a bunch of recruits go, hey, I want to be the next Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? Because they can be that guy. If they don't think they're getting the respect that they deserve, they don't think that, they're being put in positions to succeed. They've seen the staff find a guy who they, was in that exact spot. And it was a late recruitment and was, kind of floating out there in the space, trying to find a home, and found a home and made it successful, right? And they made it successful for him. Oh, and the team, also was successful, right?
Exactly.
And so that's something you can pitch, like genuinely pitch to anybody. You can walk into anybody's house and pitch that now, which is not something that Indiana's had since Archie got here, right? And even for the most part during the Korean era, not something you had during the Korean era, because Korean would get these top guys and they'd end up pretty okay, but you have some up and down seasons and you weren't sure if you were going to get a good season or not. 2 years with Mike Woodson, we've made the tournament both years and it's only gotten better for 2 years. And this year will probably be better too, to be honest.
And that's what's most exciting. It's because, not only do you have the one and done ability of Jalen Hood-Schifino, but you also have this alternative story that you can pitch to players in the transfer portal, or players who are who have spent a couple years at Indiana and they maybe aren't seeing the court as much as they want to, and you can say, hey, look, just wait your turn, just hold your ground, it'll happen to you. That's for players that have been at Indiana for a couple years and haven't played much, and for transfers that have put their name in and are looking for a new spot. Well, Mike Woodson can say, hey, I can bring you in and elevate your career pretty quickly, because that's what I did with Trayce Jackson Davis. And so, only 12 schools had two players picked in the NBA draft, or two or more players, I should say. And when you look at that, right, it's a matter of, in the Big Ten, Michigan and Penn State being the two other teams. And, it's kind of funny to see how both of those teams had very different seasons. But Indiana can now pitch a story that, hey, look, Penn State's coach moved on to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And if you want a team in this league that can put you in the NBA draft and make sure you are ready to go for the next level, the two options in this league, and you look at this year, past Indiana, Michigan State, as far as teams turning out players in the draft on a regular basis, and after that, it's kind of a stretch unless I'm missing someone. Illinois, I feel like a struggle in that department. Purdue, Ohio State's been okay. I'm not too frustrated with that. But the news that everyone's excited about is that Indiana, after TJD selection, now has the most NBA draft picks all time among Big Ten schools in an outright fashion, leading Michigan by 1. So that's exactly what you like seeing. If you're excited to see these two players play in an NBA uniform, in an NBA type of game, the Summer League starts July 3rd, Monday night. The California Classic, the Warriors and the Lakers are both part of it. Jalen and Trayce potentially will play Monday night and Wednesday night before the Vegas Summer League kicks off on Friday, July 7th. And that game, it'll be Jalen's Lakers against Trayce's Warriors. And that will be must-see television if you're an IU basketball fan. Matt, and now when you look at these two players, all right, now I'm going to ask you to put your cream and crimson colored glasses on, all right? When you look at these two players, whose career are you more excited to follow in the NBA? Is it Jalen's or is it Trayce's? And I'm curious to hear why.
I mean, this poll should be at 50-50, by the way, but I have Trayce's just because I think his position is going to be way more fun at the start. Jalen's going to, probably have to fight for playing time. I Trayce is going to play. Like, Trayce is going to be like a significant piece of that rotation from day one. Whether it's filling in for Looney or even, filling in for Draymond at some points, right? They might even play him a little bit at the 4 because of his ability to pass the ball. That's something I can totally see them doing, especially if they end up picking up like a stretch 5 or a stretch big in the
free agency period, right?
Free agency periods, off season. I don't know, like a Scola or something like a guy that can kind of spread, or Brook Lopez or something like that. Like, I'm not gonna get Brook Lopez, but
yes,
a
stretch.
5 that can shoot. Yeah, a guy that can stretch the floor a bit from the 5 position. You can play Trayce at the 4, and then all of a sudden you've got so many different sets you can run. And again, he can pass the ball, put the ball on the floor. And so you've seen him do all that stuff, and the Warriors are going to use him really well. And he's such a smart basketball player that he's going to fit right in offensively with their movement and screening and all that stuff, all that jazz. He's going to be fun to watch from game 1.
It's going to be great to see Trayce. I agree as far as the 50-50, and this podcast is going to be 50-50 because for me, it's Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? I saw Trayce play so many games in Indiana, all right? Like I did.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I mean, and we also saw Race Thompson get picked up by the Knicks for Summer League here. We saw Race and Trayce play so much as far as games in an Indiana uniform. I want to see Jalen Hood-Schifino's progress now over the next few years. I want to see what it could have looked like if someone like Jalen Hood-Schifino came through Indiana from Montverde and now goes to the league and plays a significant role on a solid Western Conference team that makes the playoffs and wants to win in the playoffs. And especially when you consider it's going to be next to LeBron and Anthony Davis. That's what I'm going to be paying attention to. And I'm excited to see Jalen's progress, because if you can see Hood-Schifino playing professional basketball at a high level, now all of a sudden Indiana can go to the Montverde players and say, hey, gentlemen, look what we did. Okay, look what we did here as far as getting you players like you in your skill level to the pros.
Right.
That's to me what's exciting here. Obviously, it's going to be fun to root for both of these guys. I'm going to be paying attention to Trayce just as much as Jalen Hood-Schifino, without a doubt. But if I had to pick one, I'm just going to narrowly lean in the favor of Jalen Hood-Schifino here, especially given the two ultra superstars on his team and seeing how he fits in that dynamic. We did make this our podcast poll over at the Hoosier Sound. Make sure you head over to the Hoosier Sound and follow us if you don't already. Like, retweet, cast your vote if you haven't yet. It's a nail biter. It's a nail biter, folks. We've gotten almost 100 votes here. The poll just came up. Trayce Jackson Davis leads the way at 55%, with Jalen Hood-Schifino at 45%. We are not allowing you to answer in a cop-out fashion, okay? No boths. No,
I was going to say that.
Does not count. Does not count. You have to pick one. And so because of that, that's how we've designed our poll. Obviously, we're excited to see both Jalen and Trayce perform in the NBA. We're going to have this conversation going on a little bit more and then really dig into how important this news is, this NBA news is for Mike Woodson, who, if you recall, he came over from the pros. So we'll dive into that in just a sec. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week at IU Sports. And we're going to select Aiden Morris, the former Hoosier soccer player who is with the Columbus Crew in the MLS. He was not only selected to the MLS All-Star game early in his professional career, but he also started for the U.S. men's national team in the Gold Cup against Jamaica and played a full 90 minutes. What a week for an individual soccer player's career to not only get named to the All-Star game, especially here in the U.S., but also play for your country in an actually sanctioned international fixture. So Aiden Morris came through Indiana. He's the 11th Hoosier to make the MLS All-Star game. It's so exciting to see him and others that come through the IU program eventually wear the colors of their national team. I know Eric Zavaleta's done it in the recent history, and there's been others as well. It's always nice to see that IU flavor in these international matches too. So Aiden Morris, a lot of good news around the world of Hoosier sports, but that really stuck out as far as determining who won the week this past week. Folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. We're growing pretty quickly, folks. So if you've already joined the masses, please tell a friend, share the news. That's the exact type of word of mouth that we really appreciate here at the Hoosier Sound. Matt, let's dig into Mike Woodson here, okay? I know a lot of folks will sit here and say Woodson hasn't gotten out of the first weekend yet. And Indiana, even after how great last season was, actually finished the year worse off than they started the year when you look at the preseason rankings. They lost by double digits in their final NCAA tournament game. He had 2 NBA draft picks, and you couldn't make it to the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16. Thing is, though, Mike Woodson now, the way I look at it, is able to pitch results. And he's continuing to prove to me that not only is he an upgrade over Archie Miller, everyone would have been an upgrade, but he's really elevating himself into the top 5, 4, 3 coaches in the Big Ten. I don't know if that's too aggressive, but to me, Mike Woodson continues to rack up wins on and off the court at Indiana.
Yeah, he does. I don't know if he's quite there in that speak yet for the Big Ten. I mean, Painter and Izzo are going to be right there at the top, of course, and then you can add in.
And then
I look, the Big Ten actually has a bunch of really good coaches right in that next tier, but and Woodson is in that tier, but I don't know where he actually lies. That's like a good question. I've never even thought to tier them.
And he's only going into year 3, right?
Right. And so that is mightily impressive, especially when you go look at the other coaches that are on the similar timeline.
That's what I'm saying.
He has done a lot since he's got here at IU, and I'm excited for the rest of the Woodson tenure. Don't get me wrong. And honestly, he's setting up IU for a significant, rise in regular outcomes, right? Like regular season outcomes. Like
it won't be as fluky.
Yeah, exactly. And when that happens, then you can go off and hire one of the better coaches or get Dusty May.
Okay. And then this is what we're saying, right? Now you can see all this intertwining together. It's the success as far as getting Indiana into the tournament in consecutive years. It's the success of getting players announced in the NBA draft, the success of winning big games against your rivals. Again, Indiana went 6-0 last year against Purdue, Michigan, and Illinois. The three Big Ten teams, I would say, are Indiana's most fierce rivals in that order. As far as the Big Ten is concerned. Now, you take that and you say, okay, now you can combine all that and really keep this pushing in the right direction. I know that you followed recruiting in some capacity as far as looking ahead in the classes of 24 and 25. The way I see it is that Indiana's stacking up for some really big classes coming up. Is it too aggressive to say you could be looking at top 5, top 10 recruiting classes coming up here in the next couple of years?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana's recruiting class next year is top 2, given the people that they're targeting. I mean, multiple 5-star recruits at almost every single position, and guys that, again, they're cutting their lists in 5, 4, 2s, and Indiana's still there. And any good position, you go look at Boogie Fland, you go look at Liam McNeely, you go look at Flory Badonga, they're in really good spots with these guys. And I mean, a class consisting of 2 or even all 3 of those guys is going to be up near the top. As far as freshman classes go, and that's like a Duke freshman class, right? That's a Duke, that's a Kentucky, that's a Michigan State on a really good year, right? That's putting IU back on the map recruiting wise with the rest of the blue bloods.
And then speaking of which, right, you talk about putting Indiana back on the map. One of the players they stole from a blue blood, maybe that's not the perfect word, stole maybe from multiple blue bloods, was Mackenzie Mbako, who's going to play for Indiana this upcoming season. Obviously, he had signed his national letter of intent to play for Duke, and then he was down to Indiana and Kansas before eventually selecting IU. Don't look now, folks. I'm sure you have if you're listening to this podcast, but Mbako and Kel'el Ware are slated to be first-round picks in this upcoming 24 NBA draft. And given the way things are shaking out right now, it would not surprise me to see Mbako put his name into the ring with a good season in the top 10, in the top 5, maybe even higher. And all of a sudden, Matt, if you're talking about back-to-back drafts where Indiana's got multiple picks and you're putting yourself in that conversation with Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Alabama, I know not all of those schools you would classify as blue bloods necessarily, but definitely some of the more successful programs in recent times. That's how you really get to tell, okay, things are going in the right direction, in addition to sprinkling in a lot of the veterans succeeding as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I will tell you this, the biggest home run potential that IU has is Kel'el Ware. If they can figure him out and get him fix his motor issue, it's huge. And then you understand, having a motor issue is the number one issue you could possibly have. It's like your transmission being blown in your car or the engine block falling off. Okay. It's quite literally, you have to do a complete overhaul of the player and his mindset. But if they can do that this summer, going into next year, and propel him into a top 10 pick, because he's got the talent to be a top 10 pick. If he can be a top 10, Indiana's going to be getting every recruit that they want from here out in the Mike Woodson era. It's Dylan Harper, you can come on down, it's going to propel IU onto a platform they haven't been on since Bob Knight left, to be honest.
And that's what I'm thinking about too, because even with the successes of a lot of programs in the Big Ten recently, Purdue's been there, Wisconsin's won it many times, Michigan State's been solid, Michigan, obviously the most recent team in the league to make a run to the national title game. There's room at the top. There's room at the top for someone to really seize control of the league. And maybe it's a couple schools that do it, but you think about the stranglehold Baylor and Kansas have had on the Big 12 with Texas Tech right there with them in the conversation. You think about what UCLA and Arizona have now done in the Pac-12, really securing that league, of course, before UCLA comes over to the Big Ten in a year's time. There's room at the top here for Indiana with a couple of more wins on and off the court to become a perennial powerhouse in this league. Now, there's also a chance that Indiana's, consistently winning 20 games a year and they're, struggling to break 500 in league play and things don't translate, because after 2 years, these are the same conversations everyone was having about Juwan Howard at Michigan. The same conversations I think right now a lot of people had after 1 year at Arizona and their coach Tommy Lloyd. Right, you don't want to get too excited, but you do see a path forward here for Indiana to, again, I'm not joking when I say this, a powerhouse in the Big Ten. That's got to be the goal for this coaching staff, right?
Right. It does. And I think that is the goal, right? Like it has to be. Like they can sense it just like we can. Like there is a spot there for you to take Izzo. Love him, but he's on the way out. Michigan has fallen off a cliff. Ohio State isn't what Ohio State once was. Being
Think about how
consistent.
Think about
It's just
how
Purdue.
excited people were with Chris Holtman and even with Greg Gard at Wisconsin. There was a lot of positive vibes after 2 years. Do you see a common theme between like Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, where they failed to capitalize on those successful first couple seasons?
Yeah, I mean that's where Indiana's at now. Like this is a make or break season. They can capitalize on the season.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you really got the ball rolling. If you fail to capitalize in the season, all of a sudden you end up stagnant like the rest of those programs do, right? So let's kind of see how the season goes, and there's a lot of pressure on a couple guys to really step up here. It includes the 5-star Kenzie Mbako, the former 5-star Chloe Ware, and really it solely almost falls upon Xavier Johnson being that point guard returning and getting that redemption, right? And that second shot at life and in a Hoosier uniform.
Yeah, and it's going to be really exciting, and that doesn't even get into players like Trey Galloway and Malik Renew, who I know everyone's excited to watch. Never mind the improvements in Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn and the newcomers, Ja'Kai Newton, Gabe Cupps. I'm sure we're missing some players to name there, but all in all, I think Indiana's got a chance here. I think when I look at Michigan, when I look at Ohio State, I feel like they lost a little bit of their identity, especially on the defensive side of the court. That's something I would want to ensure that Indiana keeps in their back pocket going forward. It's what Mike Woodson emphasized in his opening press conference when he took the job at IU. I want to see the Hoosiers keep that mindset locked in, especially on the defensive side, to make sure they don't suffer a disappointing year 3 in the Mike Woodson era. How do the Hoosiers capitalize on this upcoming season? Well, it gets started in the non-conference play, right? And we found that Indiana released their non-conference schedule a few days ago. There weren't too many surprises in there. It's just maybe some of the things as far as the sequencing of the games and the dates that they were played in, that they're going to get played on. But when you look at this non-conference slate, Matt, there are really 4 big games that stand out. It's the 2 in the Empire Classic in New York. It's a neutral site game against Auburn and Atlanta. There's a home game against Kansas in Bloomington that'll take place in December. What do you like about this non-conference slate? What do you dislike? Because I'm sure there are a lot of different ways you can look at it.
I don't think it's the hardest one Indiana's ever had, but I think there's potential for it to look really good at the end of the season. For instance, I think playing UConn, obviously, if I could win that first game, would be great. Or Texas or Louisville. I mean, Louisville's probably the worst of the 3, but Texas or UConn would be really good. And then adding Kansas, and that's pretty much all you really need. Auburn's kind of a cherry on top of, the cake. Just they should be pretty decent. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the SEC next year, but they're definitely a team that's going to be competitive. And Bruce Pearl always has teams competitive. And to be honest, it's a nice mismatch nice collection of different teams. You have UConn that plays a very heavy team style. You have Auburn that's guard dependent. You've got Louisville that's, working in a new coach. You've got Texas that's very forward and athlete dependent, right? All these different, and defensive, right? All these different play styles, which is like perfect because that's what you need going into a season where the Big Ten is going to be, you're playing multiple different play styles every night. Like, you're going to play Michigan State, who's going to play 3 guards. And then the next night, you're going to play Nebraska, who's going to want to muck it up. And then the night after that, you're going to play Penn State, who has Ace Baldwin, and he's playing solo hardened ball. And then the next night, you're playing Maryland, who's playing through Julian Reese. And then you're playing Purdue. Like, it's all these different styles of play now that are in the Big Ten, and not just playing Big Ten style basketball anymore, which is great news for the Big Ten, but terrible news for IU if they don't schedule their non-conference correctly. I think they did that here. Would I have liked to see them play a couple harder games? Yes, but can you blame the staff for wanting to have a little bit of an easier schedule with a team that you're fitting in a bunch of new pieces together? No. So at the end of the day, I give this like a B plus. I've seen some people on Twitter, especially from opposing fan bases, be like, this is a cupcake schedule. And it's like, not everybody is going to play the non-conference schedule that Gonzaga plays, right? Because they don't play anybody during the regular season when they're in conference play, right? So I'm fine with it. I would have liked to see maybe one or two more marquee games, but then you have to add in the fact that you are going to be starting Big Ten games sooner than later. So it's okay to just kind of, have a few cupcakes in there. And honestly, that's good for my mental and physical and spiritual well-being, because now I don't have to sit here and white knuckle as many basketball games as I did last year.
Unless Indiana trips up, right? Like in one of those games against a Q3 or Q4 home opponent. We've seen every Big Ten team do that in recent memory. And so, that's going to be important for Mike Woodson to emphasize to his team, look, I understand it's Harvard at Indianapolis or Florida Gulf Coast at home or Kennesaw State at home or whatever, but college basketball is all about upsets. You don't want to trip up. We'll have a few more thoughts here as far as Indiana's 4 major contests, as well as the rest of that non-conference slate coming up here in just a sec. But first, it's time for a social media shout out. Folks, if you don't follow us already, make sure you like and retweet our content, subscribe, read it at a bare minimum. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at Indiana HQ. I'm at the Hoosier Sound. Matt on Instagram. We're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
That's where you can find us for all of our fun Instagram content. You can also head over to our online shop, indianahq.com/shop, and find a fun little t-shirt or find fun little apparel for your friends, for your family, for yourself. It's that time, it's the summer, get a fun little t-shirt. You can go over to indianahq.com/shop to find all of that out. Look, Indiana's got a fascinating non-conference slate here because I see 4 matchups across the 2 games of the Empire Classic, Auburn and Kansas, where I think all 4 of those teams are going to be significantly better at the end of the season than they are in the beginning of the year. I think all 4 of those teams will be underrated at the start of the season. That's in stark contrast to what you saw the IU schedule last year, where you had, great preseason number 1 North Carolina lay a big fat egg over the course of the 22-23 regular season, missed the tournament, were too elite, they're too posh to play in the NIT, where I could actually have helped them, if you ask me. But look, this is a slate here where I see the 2 teams IU plays in the Empire Classic, and then including Auburn and Kansas. I think those 4 teams will all improve on their preseason ranking as the year goes on. And yes, that understands that UConn and Kansas will likely have a very high preseason ranking. Still, I'm saying I think all 4 teams will be better at the end of the year than they are at the start of the year. I'm very curious to see which 2 teams Indiana gets in the Empire Classic. If you ask me, I'd like to avoid Louisville. I'd rather have Louisville face either UConn or Texas in the first round. And I would like to have Indiana have a chance at beating either Texas or Connecticut in that first game and then getting the other one in the championship of the Empire Classic. Semifinal matchups have not been announced yet. We'll definitely keep an eye out and report the news on across all our social media channels when we do hear that. I look at these other 7 games, by the way, and I think there are going to be some tricky ones. I think about this Florida Gulf Coast team. They're coached by former Penn State coach Pat Chambers, so they've got a little tooth to them. Army is always a program that brings a solid mindset to the court. They do have a new coach this year, so that's going to be a little interesting. Harvard is not going to be easy, especially considering Indiana is going to play them in Indianapolis. I also consider Kennesaw State. They're not going to be as good. I just wanted to point that out to all of you. They're not going to be as good as they were this past season when they made the NCAA tournament. They've got a new head coach. Their previous head coach, Amir Abdur-Rahim, went off to South Florida. So Kennesaw State now is rebuilding to some degree. Matt, as far as those other matchups on the slate, obviously Florida Gulf Coast season opener. Wright State can be a bit prickly. You look at the overall slate, these Q3, Q4 opponents, do any of them stand out to you?
They're fine, but they all, to me, spell the same story, which is teams that are being rebuilt.
Yeah.
Right. And so they look good on paper because of last season's results, but they're really going to be worse than they were last year, which is fine, but it's going to affect Indiana's Ken Palm numbers in the long term, but that's whatever.
Yeah,
I can't be mumbling about Ken Palm numbers about next year's basketball season on June 30th.
All right, fair enough. I hear you. Look, Indiana is going to have to go 7-0 once again in those non-premier games, if you ask me, because a loss there could really put the Hoosiers back as far as their tournament resume, making sure they get the best seeding possible. But it's a lot. It's fun to talk about. As far as the NBA draft is concerned, as far as the non-conference schedule is concerned, it's great to see games on specific dates. Hoosier hysteria, and then the exhibition season, and then the regular season, with the regular season starting November 7th, just a little over 4 months away. And by the way, Indiana could still add a scholarship player. We'll see what happens as far as Mike Woodson in the last scholarship spot on this roster. We wind down here on this Friday evening, Matt. Lots to discuss. A Big Ten players getting drafted, 9 in total. 2 of them, Indiana Hoosiers and Jalen and Trayce. Non-conference schedule out. Any closing thoughts here on any of that stuff, or anything completely random? The floor is yours.
I'm happy for the guys, obviously, to get drafted. I like the non-conference schedule. I'm getting slightly excited to talk about football here soon, which feels a bit masochistic, but that's besides the point. But that's just right around the corner. It's kind of nice that we've hit July, and after July comes August, and then things just start rolling from there. So we got one more month where, Nithin and I are going to crunch together some random BS to talk about. And then we'll actually have stuff to legitimately talk about. Whether I'm going to be looking forward to watching the Indiana football Hoosiers play or not, we'll see. But weirder things have happened.
I'm looking forward to it. You kidding me? Of course I'm looking forward to it. Come on. It's football. Yeah. It's the shortest regular
I'm looking forward to college football.
You kidding me? I'm looking forward to Indiana too. Come on. It's got CBS now in the Big Ten TV contract. You've got a bunch of interesting teams. Obviously the top tier, we know who they are: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. We know what that's going to be like at the top of the league, but
I forgot about the CBS.
As is the case every year, that mix between 4 and 14, there's a lot that can happen. And Indiana, look, it's not so much the Michigan and the Ohio State games that I'm looking forward to. It's the Maryland game. It's the Rutgers game. It's those matchups that, every year, Purdue, it's Louisville in the early part of the season. Those are the games you're going to be locked into to see if Indiana can bring a better product onto the field than last year, because, the IU basketball program has done a lot of this correctly, right? In the non-conference, they handle their games against teams that they should beat. When you go into conference play, they really bring that effort and energy and intensity and rivalry matchups. And that parlays into getting that postseason appearance. And that's what we're looking for across the table, whether it's men's basketball, women's basketball, football, you name it.
By the way, in football, how long have we been playing Jeff Brom every year for? Because we played him when he was at Western Kentucky. Then he went to Purdue. We play him every year for Purdue, and now we get him in his first year at Louisville. Come on.
What are you gonna do?
I want some new faces around here. Get rid of Jeff Brom. Get him off the schedule.
Hey, look, that sounds good to me, if you ask me. But hey, Indiana had some rumors about maybe pushing Louisville off their schedule. I didn't see too much coming out of that substance-wise. But hey, look, I'm sure Scott Dolson is exploring all his options. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 301st show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. To make sure you don't miss any in the future, you can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.